People ask me this question more than almost any other. Who is the greatest? Who do I think belongs at the top? And for years, I gave careful answers, diplomatic answers, the answers that acknowledged everyone and offended nobody. Because that is what you do when you are still competing. You protect relationships. You protect the locker room. You protect the careful balance of mutual respect that makes professional tennis function at the highest level. I am not competing anymore. At 43, sitting with everything that happened across 26 years of professional tennis, the titles, the losses, the rivalries, the friendships, the moments that defined careers, and the moments that ended them, I can finally say what I actually think. Not the diplomatic version, the honest version. 5 players. 5 names that when I consider the complete picture of what greatness in tennis actually means, not just what it looks like, not just what it produces in terms of trophies, but what it demands and what it costs. These 5 stand above everyone else I ever watched or competed against. This is not a ranking. This is not a debate starter. This is simply what I believe after a lifetime inside the sport. Rod Laver. There is no honest conversation about the greatest tennis players of all time that doesn't begin here. Not because of sentiment, not because of history, because of what Rod Laver actually did and what it actually meant. 2 calendar Grand Slams. Winning all 4 majors in the same year, twice. The first time in 1962 as an amateur. The second time in 1969 as a professional after being locked out of the Grand Slams for 5 years because of professional status rules that had nothing to do with tennis and everything to do with politics. He came back after 5 years away from the biggest stages in the sport and dominated all over again, as if the time away had meant nothing, as if greatness had simply been waiting patiently for the doors to reopen. I discovered Laver the way most players of my generation did, through footage, through stories, through the conversations that happen in the locker rooms when older players talk about who came before. And what struck me immediately was not any single shot or any single result. It was the completeness. Every surface, every condition, every style of opponent. Rod Laver had answers for all of it and found those answers without the equipment, the training science, the coaching infrastructure that modern players take for granted. People sometimes dismiss players from earlier eras by pointing to what they didn't have. I think about what they did have. They had tennis, just tennis. And Rod Laver played it better than almost anyone who has ever picked up a racket. When I think about the ceiling, the absolute upper limit of what this sport can demand and what a player can deliver, I think about him. He is not a memory. He is a standard. Everything else begins there. Bjorn Borg. Bjorn Borg retired at 26 years old. 26. With 11 Grand Slams, 5 consecutive Wimbledon titles, and a composure under pressure that I spent my entire career trying to understand and replicate. I was a child when Borg was competing. I didn't watch him in real time the way I watched Edberg or McEnroe or the players of the generation immediately before mine. I discovered him the way I discovered Laver, through footage and stories and the reverence that players who competed against him could never quite conceal even decades later. What struck me about Borg was the mental architecture, the ability to be completely present in the most pressurized moments of professional sport, without anything visible breaking down. 5-set Wimbledon finals against McEnroe matches that by any measure should have been emotionally overwhelming, and Borg looking like he was hitting practice balls on a Tuesday morning. That is not natural. That is built, constructed through years of deliberate effort to separate the emotional experience of competition from the physical execution of it. I understood that immediately because I was working on the same thing. The young Federer, the teenage Federer who threw rackets and showed every frustration, was trying to become something closer to what Borg had been. Not the shots, the stillness, the ability to be fully alive inside the competition and completely controlled in the expression of it simultaneously. Borg achieved that at 26 and then walked away from it. The retirement remains one of the great mysteries of tennis. What drives someone to leave at the peak of everything they built? I have my theories, but the tennis he produced before that decision, the standard he set for how the game could be played with both excellence and composure, that stayed in the sport long after he left it. I carried it. Many players carried it. That is what genuine greatness does. It outlasts the person who created it. Rafael Nadal. Rafael Nadal is the most mentally tough athlete I have ever seen in any sport. I say that having competed against him more than anyone else in my career, having lost to him in matches that I believed I should have won, having watched him compete through physical pain and doubt and circumstances that would have ended other careers years earlier. What separates Rafa from almost everyone else is not the topspin or the physicality or the famous left arm. It is the refusal. The absolute refusal to accept that a point is over before it is over, that a match is lost before the last ball lands, that the physical deterioration which every athlete eventually faces means the competitive spirit has to deteriorate alongside it. Our Wimbledon final in 2008, considered by many the greatest tennis match ever played, was the clearest expression of what Rafa is. 5 sets, 4 hours and 48 minutes. He wins in the 5th. I had match points. I had momentum. I had the crowd willing me across the finish line with an energy that was almost overwhelming. None of it was enough, because Rafael Nadal simply would not lose. Not that day. Not on that court. Not while there was one more ball to hit and one more point to fight for. 14 French Opens. 14 on one surface against the greatest players of 2 generations across 2 decades. That number is not a statistic. It is a statement about human will expressed through tennis. I have enormous respect for what Rafa built, and even more respect for what it cost him to build it. Novak Djokovic. This one requires honesty, because honesty is the only thing that does it justice. Novak Djokovic is statistically the greatest tennis player who has ever lived. 24 Grand Slams. More weeks at world number 1 than anyone in history. Victories on every surface against every generation of champion across 20 years of professional competition. The numbers are not debatable. They are simply what they are. What I respect most about Novak, and I want to be precise about this because I mean it completely, is what he did without the support that Rafa and I received throughout our careers. The crowds were rarely with him. The narrative was rarely with him. He competed for 2 decades in stadiums that were frequently rooting against him, in a sport where the public conversation consistently undervalued what he was achieving, and he kept winning anyway. Through sheer force of excellence that refused to require external validation to sustain itself. That is harder than it sounds. I know because I benefited from the opposite experience. Crowds supported me, media celebrated me. The narrative around my career was consistently generous. Novak had none of that and produced results that exceeded mine. The mental strength that requires the ability to convert rejection into motivation match after match across an entire career is something I genuinely admire. We had battles, great ones. Wimbledon 2019, when he saved match points and beat me in the final, is a match I still think about, not with bitterness, with respect for what he produced under that pressure. He deserves everything the record says he deserves. History will be generous to Novak Djokovic. It should be. Stefan Edberg. I cannot make this list without him. I will not make this list without him. Stefan Edberg was my childhood idol, the player I watched on television in Basel as a young boy and decided, before I fully understood what deciding meant, that this was who I wanted to become. Not just as a tennis player, as a competitor, as a person who competed. The serve and volley game. The one-handed backhand that I copied so completely it became indistinguishable from my own. The composure, the dignity, the absolute refusal to make tennis ugly regardless of what was happening in the match or the score or the circumstances. What Edberg gave me was not a technique or a tactic. It was a philosophy. The belief that you could compete at the absolute highest level, that you could want to win with everything you had, and still treat the game and your opponent with complete respect. That excellence and integrity were not in tension. That you could have both simultaneously if you were willing to work for both simultaneously. I worked for both for 26 years. Every moment of that work had Stefan Edberg's name on it somewhere. When I coached with him in 2014 and 2015, the experience was unlike anything I had known professionally. Not because of what he taught me tactically, because of the feeling of finally having a proper conversation with the person who had shaped everything before the conversation was possible. He is on this list because he belongs on this list. Because the greatest tennis player I ever became was built on the foundation he laid before I was old enough to thank him for it. 5 players, 5 completely different stories, 5 completely different versions of what greatness in tennis demands and what it produces. Laver showed me that standards exist outside of eras. Borg showed me that composure is a choice. Nadal showed me that will is a physical force. Djokovic showed me that excellence does not require approval. Edberg showed me that how you compete matters as much as whether you win. I tried to carry all of that, every match, every title, every moment when the pressure was highest and the margin was smallest, and everything I had built was either going to hold or it wasn't. It held. For 26 years, it held. Because of these 5 men,